Okay. Hi, Angie and Sarah. Okay, I see someone. So you're good. Can you just type back to me if you hear and the sound is okay? Hi, says Sarah. Okay, see someone. Good. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to officially welcome everyone to this seminar tonight, Responsive Feeding Environments in the Early Years. I'll just repeat the introduction for those of you here in the room. I'm Jessie Lee McIsaac, and I'm a Canada Research Chair in Early Childhood here at Mount St. Vincent University. I've had the pleasure of working with our guests tonight in several different capacities. I'm excited that they're here to share their knowledge on responsive feeding with us. I just want to note before we get going, Chris, our PR co-op student, is going to be live tweeting the session. If anyone is into Twitter or would like to join along, please feel free to use the hashtags up on the screen. And as always, you can follow us on our handles on the screen as well. So the agenda for today, I'm going to set some context why we're here, how we got to here. There is a bit of a background as to why we're doing this session today. Then we're going to share a video from Misty and Lynda of some of their work in this area, and then there'll be a PowerPoint presentation. We'll do a bit of a question and answer period, and then we're going to actually stop the screen share portion of the session, and we're going to have facilitated discussion here at the Mount and then also at our two NSCC campuses. So just for those of you in the room, so we are live streaming to NSCC Marconi and King's Tech, and we're really excited to do this in this way. This is also our first time doing it, so we're kind of trying to learn as we go. There will be an evaluation, so please give us feedback as to how it went. So this is the plan for the next hour and a half. We will be ending at 7:30. Someone asked about that. Okay, so why are we here? So I'm, as I mentioned, a research chair at the Mountain. I came in 2018, so a year and a half ago. I can't say that I'm new anymore. And one of the first things that I did in my research chair position was brought together a group of colleagues to find ways to better share research policy and practice. So connect the dots between research happening in early childhood and the work happening on the ground in childcare and our early learning environments, and to policy as well. So we collaboratively worked together to submit a grant to a research council called the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, or SHRC, where we got some funding to bring people together to talk about the early years really broadly. So not just food and responsive feeding, but really broadly about the issues around early childhood and where we might need to better connect the dots around research policy and practice. So that event was held in November 2018, and we brought together 77 people that represented those different spheres of influence around early childhood. The goal of the event was to strengthen collaborations, promote collective learning, and identify ways to move together. One of the voices that we felt, two of the voices that we really felt was missing, however, from that conversation was educators, the actual on-the-ground educators and families. Parents. And through our conversations with our team, we were trying to find ways to reach educators and families in some different ways beyond this kind of one-day event. We also wanted to build on the power of storytelling. So we brought storytellers that represented various different lenses and experiences of working with families with young children. And they just told stories around a table with others. It was beautiful. It was really an opportunity to listen with intent and to learn from one another's stories and experiences working with young children and their families. So in this seminar today, and what we hope to do in the future, we're going to really harness that power of storytelling, and that's why we brought our guest speakers, and also why we're sharing a video, to really hear from the lens and the experiences of people working directly with families and young children. So that's kind of the context of why we're here. As I mentioned, this is our, so we have a bit of internal funding from Mount St. Vincent University to do this again. So this is our first trial route of doing it through satellite sessions, bringing people together here, having the facilitated discussion opportunity. So we do want to hear back from you about your experience with it. It's not meant to only talk about responsive feeding either. I was really encouraged to hear that people were interested in this type of session because we haven't had the opportunity to attend something around the topic. That's really encouraging. If there's a lot of interest, we could potentially do another one on this topic, but we'll really be looking to you for guidance on as to what else we might want to do in this format. There's a lot of knowledge out there in Nova Scotia and across Atlantic Canada on the topic of early childhood in lots of different facets. So we're excited to be offering some other sessions, likely in the early fall. Whoops. That's the last slide. Don't go there yet. So I'm gonna, Brenda and Chris are like my helpers here. Sorry, I'm not usually this adept with IT. So I'm gonna pass it over to the video, I think, first, and then I'll allow Lynda and Misty to introduce yourselves because the others wouldn't have heard who you are and what you do as well. So get you to reintroduce. You good? Yeah. Okay.
You guys get to start the video now?
Would you like to introduce yourself first?
Introduce ourselves
Sure.
first?
Do whatever you want.
Okay. As I said, I'm Lynda Mann, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Applied Human Nutrition here at the Mount. And early childhood nutrition, health, and safety is one of my teaching areas and one of my research areas. And I was involved with Misty, Dr. Misty Rossiter. I think first back about 2013, 2012, 2013, with a project called the Nutrition Standards in Childcare Project. And that was a project. It was the idea of Dr. Rossiter, and I was really keen to partner with her on that. And this project explored the impact of the new food and nutrition standards in Nova Scotia, and for regulated child care centers. And so we did. We looked at the food records of children. We did parent interviews. We did surveys of the child care centers directors, and compiled our information, our data. And one of the things that came out of it really was the unanticipated findings. Yes, we had all of the important findings about nutrition intake and recommendations for value and perhaps challenges with the standards. But it was the unanticipated findings that really captured us, and felt that we needed to explore this area around responsive feeding. And so that was the idea to do this video, really intending to help generate some of those discussions. I'll talk a little bit more about that later when I go through my presentation. Anything to add on that? Is that?
No, that's good. So I'll just reintroduce myself as well for the satellite site. So I'm Misty Rossiter, registered dietitian and associate professor in the nutrition program at UPEI, and also adjunct status here in the applied nutrition at the Mount. I'm interested in the perinatal period and healthy child development, with a particular lens or interest or focus on feeding practices, which of course encompasses responsive feeding, but also nutrition policy as well, and healthy eating guidelines. So the work that Lynda and I started so many years ago, I'm thrilled to see it sort of ongoing, and as I moved to PEI, doing similar work there as well, and a lot of the same stories, and there's a real richness in the room too with, we're going to hear some stories from one of these follow-up the story sharing project, but I just sense there's a lot. Everyone has their own stories about feeding as well, so hopefully you'll be able to identify, and there'll be some opportunity a little bit later this evening to chat about that a little bit. Thanks, Chris.
Nova Scotia has long been concerned about the health and welfare of young children in childcare centres, However, with increasing rates of chronic disease in the province and more knowledge about the influences on the development of healthy eating behaviors, change to the way we support young children was needed. In 2007, the province embarked on a revision of the regulations and guidelines that promote healthy eating in regulated childcare settings. The Nutrition Standards in Childcare project began in 2012. This was a research project that wanted to see if the standards and guidelines for food and nutrition in regulated childcare settings helped to create healthier environments for young children.
Hi, sorry guys, we just realized the other side's having issues accessing the video, so we're just gonna see that first. There we go. There we go.
Particularly healthier meals and snacks, create healthier environments for young children, welfare of young children in child care centres. However, with increasing rates of chronic disease in the province and more knowledge about the influences on the development of healthy eating behaviors, change to the way we support young children was needed. In 2007, the province embarked on a revision of the regulations and guidelines that promote healthy eating in regulated childcare settings. The Nutrition Standards in Childcare project began in 2012. This was a research project that wanted to see if the standards and guidelines for food and nutrition in regulated childcare settings helped to create healthier environments for young children, particularly healthier meals and snacks. As you may know, the standards and guidelines came into effect the previous year. During our research, we spoke with policymakers, public health representatives, childcare directors, early childhood educators, and even parents of young children. It soon became evident that all of us were very similar. Many of us were parents, or aunts and uncles, or grandparents, or friends of people with young children. And we all understood and could relate to the joys and challenges of feeding young children. More than that, when conversations and engagement focused on our hopes and aspirations for our children and how we would like to see them relate to food throughout their life, we all seemed to say the same thing. We would like our children to enjoy many different types of food and to feel in control of their own decisions around food and eating. The following vignettes are some of the stories we heard along the way and represent to us a reminder that although we may individually support young children in different ways as they learn to eat, we are all trying to achieve the same thing: to help children grow up with a healthy relationship with food that will last them a lifetime.
Children are so dynamic at meal times. They're more talkative, they like to chat, they like to tell you all about, what they're doing during their day, their favorite things that they're doing. So really, one of the best things about mealtime with children is the conversations you have. They're really great. The children are more dynamic and they're outgoing and they're relaxed, so they're telling you all of their lovely, lovely stories that they like to tell.
Yeah, I get to interact and they all know me. They know when snack's coming, they know when lunch is coming, and they'll stop in the kitchen in the morning and say, "Hey, Shauna, what's for snack?" Or I enjoy the family style dining that we have here because I'm all for sitting at the table with my family because that's what we did at home and that's what we do at my house. So I just like, you talk about your day and, what you didn't like and what you did like.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of aspects about meal times and hanging out with my kids that I really enjoy. Is that I find that that's the time we get to talk to each other, right? I get to hear about the day, stories about what's happening in the world, what they're thinking. Just because it's a focused time, they can ask things. They don't seem to make sense of the world. Recently, my daughter has been having these dreams, and she seems to only tell us about the dreams when she's eating. Like she has these memories of, when she lived in another world, and so she'll tell us these stories about that when she's eating. So yeah, there we go.
Most of the time, the funniest things are, the kids who just want ketchup on everything. You're making them this beautiful meal and they want ketchup on it. Or, the children who pour their milk. Even this morning, I went into a room and they're having fruit salad and this little guy was adamant that he had to pour his milk on his fruit salad. They just like to mix things up and you're looking over and all of a sudden, they got it all mixed up in a mishmash and things. So using all those techniques and having a lot of laughter around the table for us is important.
The whole experience is kind of a funny experience. There's a lot of negotiations that go on during mealtime, especially with my daughter. her intelligence is really coming through, especially at mealtime. And so, everything is like, 3 more bites, sweetie? No, mommy, you mean 1 more bite? Or, it's just always back and forth. And also, I really learn the words that she's learning at mealtime. So she's starting to use these new phrases and big words that she's trying to incorporate into her everyday talk at mealtime. So the other day she told me that she has an allergy to red meat and she couldn't eat chili. And I said, but you just ate red meat yesterday. Oh no, mommy, my allergy to red meat is only in chili.
I mean, I think it's kind of funny now that I have a little one. You kind of forget as an adult that food is something that's really new to a kid, and foods can be so different from each other. So I think it's just funny, every time I introduce a new food or my daughter sees a new food, the way that she experiences is so different. You kind of forget that, everything we know as adults has a different taste, but the how hot it is or how spicy it is or what it looks like or what it feels like. It's really interesting to see her experience food for the first time, and cool to see her kind of play around with it and to see her taste it. So you can tell right away after she takes a bite, does she really like it, or is she unsure? Does she let it just fall out of her mouth? So I think it's kind of funny just to watch her experience new foods. It's pretty cool.
Well, when it's just me and her, it's fun because we have conversations together at mealtime. She'll tell me about her day, which is funny because it's never what actually happened. It's all imagination. I also like it when she eats, which I know seems kind of silly, but when she'll actually sit down and eat her meal and say that she likes it, that's exciting for me as a parent because it's very rare that children like what you put in front of them. So,
I think what I enjoy most about mealtime with my daughter is that she really slows eating down. Eating cannot be a quick ordeal anymore, a quick experience. It's not like eating and going. It really slows down, and we have conversations, and she asks about our day, and it's really sweet actually because she hears my husband and I ask each other how our day is, and she'll say, "So, Mommy, how was your day?" So I like that she forces us to slow down. She forces us to socialize, and yeah, I really appreciate that aspect of it.
I find it challenging when they do throw their food on the floor, or when they make a lot of mess. Mealtime, like I said, I work with toddlers, so they're 18 months and older, so it's a lot of mess. And I don't mind cleaning up the mess, but when children deliberately do things, like I said, I really try to encourage them to clean up their own mess. That's the biggest challenge I find, and sometimes with the communication, if they really can't communicate and they get frustrated with not being able to communicate what they want, and I'm not understanding, and I'm trying to meet their needs, but I don't know what they want necessarily. That's the biggest challenge. I also find some challenges are like food waste. I really don't like wasting food. I never force children to eat because I don't believe in that. I don't believe I would want someone to force me to eat something that I didn't want to eat. But I want them to still eat food that they want, and I want there to be enough food. I don't want them to go hungry either. So I struggle a little bit with that because we have a set meal plan. So if they don't like the meal at all, then they might not get lunch that day. And I struggle a little bit with that because I don't want anyone to go hungry.
Definitely a lot more crazy when she was younger, so when it came to feeding, getting it all over herself. But as she gets older, there's more challenges. Then there are crazy fun stories, but she does always surprise me with the type of foods that she will want to eat. So for example, if I've made a stir fry, she will say that I don't eat veggies, please don't do that. But very well, in fact, she does eat vegetables, she just doesn't want them in her stir fry, so it involves making a deconstructed stir fry for her. Or if I'm having a salad that I don't think that she will have any interest in trying, she'll be asking, oh, Mommy, what are you eating? And then she'll want to gobble that salad up. So it's all the greens, sprouts, chickpeas, peppers, chicken, spices, and she just will eat that right up. So she continues to surprise me with her eating habits.
Some aspects of mealtime that I find challenging are when she doesn't want to eat what I prepared for her, or if I ask her what she wants to eat, the only thing she'll say is spaghetti. So, which, you know, is not so bad sometimes, but when you go through the effort of making, you know, say quinoa and, you know, steamed vegetables and like chicken or fish, and the only thing she wants to eat is the chicken, it can be very frustrating because you put all that work in and you really want them to have whole nutrition when they're eating, especially considering the fact that you don't know what they're eating when they're at daycare or in a school environment. So
sometimes it can be challenging if you've packed a snack, for example, that she hasn't tried before, but you assume that she would like, and she doesn't end up liking it. You worry as a parent, you know, is she getting enough to eat? I mean, even with my daughter being a good eater as she is, sometimes I do have that in my head, you know, is she still hungry? You know, she's still 1.5, so she doesn't necessarily know how to tell me, you know, I'd like a little bit more of that kind of thing. So I do sometimes worry that she's getting enough, or getting enough of the good stuff that she needs.
I think when Lynn doesn't want to eat what I've made for her, what my husband's made for her, or kind of even if we eat out and she orders something and doesn't want to eat it, it makes me feel frustrated, obviously, as a parent. I think that's like how most parents feel as a parent, period, that they're frustrated, but mostly frustration, absolutely. Just because I'm worried about her nutrition, so making sure that she's getting everything that she needs, so, and not just eating candy and cookies and things like that, that we don't give her a lot of, but you know, it's there, so.
And then I said, no kid ever starves themselves. You know, it's okay. But I think inside, I'm like totally freaking out. Okay, what? They haven't eaten again? So I think every single parent has these moments of anxiety where you're completely worried, and you want to make sure that your kids are healthy, and and I'm always thinking that a good part of good health is good nutrition, good diet. And so I'm perpetually always feeling that we're never quite there.
So some of the aspects around mealtime that I do enjoy with my little girl involve grocery shopping. She loves to go grocery shopping with me. We like to plan our meals together. We also enjoy cooking together. It can be challenging, but at the same time it's very rewarding because she's able to see us preparing a meal together, and it gets her more interested and enthusiastic about eating that meal as well that she's helped prepare.
I really hope that children realize the importance of proper nutrition. One of the things that we're doing now is a garden. So the children are outside planting a garden, and they're growing their vegetables, and they're talking about tomatoes, and they're talking about cucumbers and pumpkins and different things that we're growing outside, so they're actually seeing it from start. So now when we have something on our plate, we talk a lot about where that came from, how does it grow, who must have planted it, where did it come from, and they're actually getting that respect for where it's coming from. So they tend to eat it more, and they're more open to having it. It's not all pre-packaged and made in the store and come in a Happy Meal or in a fast food box, So I'm really hoping that what we're doing with the children is going to teach them the value of a really good, nutritious meal.
I hope that they, encourage their children to eat different foods and try, different spices, go anywhere, like try something new, try Indian food, try everything, because you never know.
So my hopes for the future for my daughter are that she has just a healthy relationship with food, and I want that to involve, not looking at food as good food or bad food. And it's difficult because I look at food as good food or bad food, and I'm hoping that I'm not portraying that, and then she's not taking that on. I just want her to be able to eat food, enjoy it, not feel guilty, and be flexible, be able to, in different environments, just to be able to eat and enjoy it.
From there, a lot of it, I think, is just common sense about what she should be eating. But on the other hand, it's pretty easy to be taken in when you're in the grocery store and you see a box and it says, this is really good. As a parent, there is some instincts that you want to follow as a parent, that you know that if it's in a box, it's not going to be as good as something else. But then again, there are times when you need to grab something in a box or in a package, and you do end up relying more on what it says than otherwise. Looking into the future, I think one of my biggest hopes for my daughter is that she has a really healthy relationship with food, and I think a lot of parents would say that, but thinking back to my childhood, my parents always did the best they could, but on the other hand, we ate a lot of candy and we ate a lot of sweet things. And I think looking back, you know, in a perfect world, we would have been given more healthier options. So I really want my daughter to grow up thinking that fruits and vegetables are delicious, because they really can be if you make them the right way and you present them the right way. And I guess my biggest hope is that she has that really healthy relationship and enjoys what she's eating too.
You know, in terms of trying to understand, you know, how we support our kids about the eating and nutrition, it's a hard thing, right? Like, especially in a society where we exist, where body image is such a huge thing. There's, you know, there's an ambivalence about, you know, how I talk about food and how I present that to my kids, because I don't want it to be presented as an issue, and I don't want them to sort of like. But I mean, as I say that, I also am very conscious that I don't want my kids to drink pop, you know, like, you know, as a treat, yeah. But I don't want it to be something that's in, you know, in our house. I don't want to have candy. So I'm always thinking about those things, and like, how do we nurture them, and how do we demonstrate that, you know, good nutrition requires, if you're going to eat good food, then generally that's going to have an impact on, you know, your diet, your health, and all those things. How do we want to influence it? I mean, I think hopefully we're demonstrating it. Hopefully we, you know, are not sort of saying one thing and doing the other, and that we are actually eating the kinds of food that we hope that they will value and, you know, surround themselves with.
Did you reshare your screen?
It's good, yeah.
Okay, so I think we're all set. We're just going to sort of transition now into a presentation as well. So thank you for being here tonight, first of all. It's a beautiful evening out. And there's not a lot of windows in this room, so hopefully we'll be a little bit engaging. And again, like I said, we'll have an opportunity to chat and to share. So as Lynda had mentioned, we had collected all this data through the nutrition Stanford, the project Nutrition Standards in Childcare, and again, similar work that I had done on PEI with their healthy eating guidelines. And I've been asked from a number of provinces across Canada to sort of consult and provide input on either nutrition standards for childcare or healthy eating guidelines for the early years. And a lot of it really is around sort of nutrient criteria and strict recommendations around how much of what. But I'm finding more and more the conversation really is moving to, and parents are really wanting to talk about the how and the where we eat, and you know, how we talk about food and how we relate to food, and a lot of rules, right? Really feeling exhausted around a lot of rules with food. So the story sharing was sort of sparked that and wanted that extra content. So having the opportunity to talk to parents and ECEs, and on PEI and directors, in Nova Scotia, and on PEI we included cooks as well. A lot of really valuable perspectives, because there certainly is more to the story than just, again, that nutrient criteria or meeting a certain number. Sorry, no, someone can't see the screen. Okay. Chris, would you mind? Is there someone to the screen? Sorry, everyone. We see it now. We see it. Good. That's great. Okay, so as you heard, caregivers, and when we were talking, because we had lots of different voices with this project, when we talk about caregivers, we're talking about parents, or we're talking about ECDs, or whoever that primary caregiver may be for that particular child. So they really were wanting, you know, the general message is they were hoping that children would develop this healthy relationship with food and thinking about how do we get there. And that's where we start to take a responsive feeding lens and really look at how do we create responsive feeding environments, you know, whether that's at home or at an earlier center or a child care center. And so responsive feeding refers to a reciprocal relationship between an infant or a child and his or her caregiver. And that particular relationship is characterized by the child communicating feelings of hunger and satiety. And that could be through verbal cues or nonverbal cues. And then those cues are followed up by a response from the caregiver. And responsive feeding practices we see are highlighted or represented in our national dietary guidance. So the nutrition for healthy term infants and children, you see responsive feeding practices highlighted in that document. The new Canada's Food Guide has responsive feeding practices quite prominently for the first time ever. So with Canada's Food Guide, we always had the, again, what to eat and how many servings and you know, what types of foods will give us the nutrients that we need. But again, for the first time, the where, when, how, and what to eat, those types of, where, when, why, and how to eat are highlighted even more prominently. So really sort of demonstrating that it is important and certainly plays a role. So we know, so they're through these national guidance and particularly within Canada's Food Guide, and they're there because they play a role in developing that healthy relationship with food through the early years, which is why responsive feeding practices are also prominently placed in the nutrition standards and in healthy eating guidelines for child care centers. And they're there because evidence suggests that those particular practices really build, and if that foundation is built early in life, you've got that foundation for self-efficacy, so the confidence around feeding, the ability to self-regulate and emotional management around food. Those foundational practices, if developed early in life, will carry through to adolescence and then straight through to adulthood and really contribute to lifelong health and well-being. When we think about the different roles in responsive feeding or highlighting on that reciprocal relationship, we've got different roles for parents and educators and caregivers, and they're responsible for making food available. So we hope that, or our wish is that's predominantly healthy options. Parents and educators are also responsible for creating a structured meal routine and providing some expectations around mealtime. And so expectations could be things like, most often we try to come to the table for supper, or when we do come to the table for supper, you know, maybe all electronics are left away from the table, or those types of things. Parents and caregivers are also responsible for responding predictably to child's hunger and satiety signals, as well as providing appropriate internal cues that are going to help that child reinforce self-regulation. So when we talk about cues, external cues or non-sensory cues are things like, here you go, here, take a sandwich or have a sandwich. Oh, look how good Susie's eating. You know, these types of cues that are really well intended, but perhaps a little bit, they're less desirable than the internal cues that we're looking for. The one that's used all the time, and again with the best intentions ever, is the 3 more bites. Oh, you know, 3 more bites, or, you know, 5 more bites. Oh, just 1 more. Can you take 1 more bite? Again, really well intended, but less desirable when we're looking to help that child reinforce their own self-regulation. What's perhaps preferred and a little bit more challenging to sort of tweak your thinking around is the internal or the sensory cues. So, are you hungry, or do you want a sandwich, or would you like to have one? Are you full? Check in, getting the child to check in with themselves or check in with your belly. How are you feeling? So those are sort of parent, educator, caregiver responsibilities in the feeding roles. The child also comes to the table with certain roles as well. So the child is responsible for signaling cues of hunger and fullness, and that's an innate ability. So children are born with the ability to signal for hunger and fullness. And over time, that signaling can become lessened, or those signals that we're supposed to be looking for and children give can be dulled oftentimes because of a combination of things. So it could be the 3 more bites, 5 more bites, You don't get this till you have that, have a little bit more, in addition to just the overwhelming amounts of foods that are available sort of in our food environment. So a number of different reasons why perhaps that gets lessened or that signal can be dulled, but that's an innate ability. We're born with that ability to signal, and that's the child's responsibility. Also, children are responsible for deciding if they will eat, and if they are going to eat, how much they're going to eat. And that can be a hard one, again, for caregivers and parents to get their heads around this as well. And we've seen it in one of the video clips or one of those quick stories that were shared that, that can be hard to take if a child doesn't want to eat. You feel like, are they going hungry, or are there other reasons that, perhaps they're not eating? So it's not that it's challenging, but again, it's their responsibility and it's part of their role in responsibility. When we think about creating or fostering a healthy eating environment or a responsive feeding environment, when we were talking with centers, there are certain best practices that centers are able to do or seem to be doing really well, and others that are a little bit more challenging, and that makes sense too. We don't have time to sort of go through all of the findings, but I put a few of the best practices up here. And the first one is this sort of predictable meal routine. So having a predictable meal routine really allows children to express their autonomy with their own decisions. So they know when to expect food, and they can have some autonomy with that decision. So if part of their role, that reciprocal relationship, if part of their role is deciding if they will eat and if they are going to eat how much, knowing that they can say no, because you know what, I know, or within a reasonable amount of time, I know lunch is coming, or snack is just around the corner, so maybe I'm not going to choose those types of foods. So again, all sort of leading back to reinforcing that self-regulation for that particular child. And that's an easier one to do. Certainly childcare centers and earlier centers have that down a little bit more than perhaps even the home environment. But it's important because then they can have those decisions and be sort of respectful around that child decision. The next one is family-style meal service, and again, centers are doing a reasonably good job of offering this despite sort of the challenges around family-style meal service. And many of you in the room may know there's a lot of challenges around. And if you don't know, family-style meal service is where there's sort of a family plate and children get to choose from that particular food offering, and there's a number of different variations on it. But that's essentially, children get to again decide what they're taking and how much. And that's an important best practice, particularly because of the social cooperation that children have to engage in. They get to interact with being kind, demonstrating kindness, and being the recipient of kindness in that particular situation. And again, they're making decisions around food, as well as learning some sort of social etiquette around the table. The third one, which is a bit more challenging for, again, valid reasons, is the role modeling and the caregiver, so the educator or the parent engagement during mealtime. And this is where we are hoping that parents and educators are going to enjoy the same food, so not even just sitting down with the child, but actually enjoying the same food and showing how delicious these particular foods are, or even if we don't necessarily feel that way, just the way that we talk about food and look at food and engage with food around the table. So it is children viewing educators and their role models consuming particular foods, but having the opportunity to talk about all the colors and the crunch, and even, again, some people are a little bit more comfortable with this than others, but allowing children to feel the food and, again, balancing sort of social appropriateness at the table versus, feeling the textures of food. Eating different foods can be a new experience for a lot of different children, and that's how they learn to have those early days of learning with food. So that all sounds really warm and fuzzy and lovely, but the reality is, in many times, that responsive feeding practices seem simple. Okay, no problem, we can check the box on a lot of these. They're actually extremely challenging to either establish or to sustain over time. And that's because there's a lot of different factors, complex factors, that can really undermine the confidence that parents or educators have with doing some of these practices. And so it could be the fact that lives are crazy. So from a parent point of view, we've heard a lot about this from the qualitative interviews that we did with parents, the lack of time. Parents are running out the door to go to all of the great activities that they're taking their children to, and there's just not time to sort of sit around the table or the mealtime expectations that they want to have to really fulfill them. The lack of time is a problem. And if they do get out and about and they're picking up something on the road, the food environment that we find ourselves in isn't necessarily conducive to offering the types of foods that they perhaps would like to or they would want to. Another particular issue really is the reality of income or food insecurity, or having the money to purchase the types of foods that families would want to purchase. So when we talk about, again, responsive feeding practices, offering foods, healthy foods multiple times, being in control of what foods actually come into the house, again, seems simple, easy to understand and check the box on, but if you don't know necessarily where, how you're going to access these types of food, or if your income doesn't necessarily dictate that you can buy the foods that you want to, that's incredibly challenging. So again, factors that needs to sort of be stated, that it is complex and the expectations have to be as such. Another issue, and again, this is just a sample of the many sort of challenges and the complex factors, but is the picky eating and the child temperament. So we've got the grumpy little guy here who doesn't really want it, doesn't appear to be wanting to eat, and again, we heard that in the video clips as well. So if we're talking about providing that distraction-free environment, catching those cues to hunger, if everyone's just getting the door and everybody's way past the cues to hunger, again, it can be really challenging to try to be mindful of these particular practices and to catch them right at the right time as well. The last sort of complex factor that I want to talk about is, in addition to sort of picky eating and child temperament, but legitimate pediatric feeding issues. And I think it was, Charlotte, you talked about, there are certain childhood conditions that have real feeding issues, pediatric feeding disorders, and responsive feeding practices can be super challenging when we're working with those particular children and their families. So things that we might normally expect if you're working with children who have a particular condition, ADHD or autism, for example, things change a little bit, and then the best practices may need to change along with that, and that's okay. But again, a number of these factors together make responsive feeding practices incredibly challenging for parents and caregivers. Which means a lot of the time, or it's not surprising that we see the use of pressure or forcing children to eat certain foods, using rewards or trying to coerce children to eat certain foods, again, very well intended, and also perhaps a loss of confidence with the role modeling as well. So if you're not seeing immediate results and you don't really want to eat that particular kind of food, it can be difficult to kind of believe in the process or to sustain those particular practices. So just for a final slide on my end, I wanted to provide, when we're talking about these sort of complex challenges or complex factors and some of the less desirable ways that we tend to work with them, we heard a lot of this from our educators and from parents and from center directors as well. So just quickly to pick up on a few of them, and the role modeling. So we know role modeling is one of the key elements of responsive feeding practices. And it certainly can go beyond family meal, the meal table and meal time, involving children in all aspects of sort of the process of purchasing food to making it to actually eating it. We know there's evidence that suggests that is beneficial in getting children to consume particular foods. But one mom was sharing with us her real frustration in trying to have the whole family model, sort of eating vegetables, broccoli in particular. And she says it's things like broccoli. My husband, of course, pokes at it and he scowls at it, and she just was frustrated with, she was trying to get him to sort of get on board. So as much as she had her head around some of these practices that she was trying to engage in, the reality is, and Lynda and I were just talking about this earlier, children aren't just with mom or with dad or with grandma or at the center or in schools. These feeding environments look different in different places. So she was frustrated with that. A director from a particular center had mentioned as well, if an educator doesn't like something, nobody in the room does either. And so that sort of speaks to the power of role modeling and these little faces sort of looking up at that one person who's carrying all the pressure to, again, not necessarily like everything, but the reality is that the role modeling is a key factor. Also, with regards to setting up that mealtime, that pleasant mealtime experience, another sort of key element of responsive feeding. A mom had mentioned eating is something that you do. It's not a leisure thing, so you sit down as a family. It's like a scheduled chore. So it was just eating with the family was just one more piece of conflict for her family that often ended up in a fight or screaming or everybody just seeming genuinely unpleasant. And so her frustrations really came through with that as well. Finally, the last quote is around using food to reward either behavior or to consume other types of food, or to coerce a child to consume lots of different types of food. And again, a lot of us grew up with sort of this is standard practice, right? It was this is how you got dessert, was if you ate your meal. And again, over time, evidence has suggested that there might be some short-term effectiveness to these types of practices. So you do see that, well, the child probably does want fill in the blank, whatever it is, the sucker or the brownie or the ice cream. So they'll go ahead and they'll likely try it or have it. Maybe against their will or just they will sort of cooperate. So there is short-term effectiveness with using food as a reward, but longer-term evidence suggests that it creates a positive association with that particular food reward, which often tends to be of low nutrient value and high sort of energy density. So this is the treat foods that we're looking at. And one mom was perfectly okay with this. She says, she knows I don't care who's around. She's not getting one bit of dessert unless she eats. And I'll eat it right in front of her. That does not bother me one bit because I think it's a good lesson. So again, really well intended, but again, perhaps a little bit less desirable, and really trying to move away from these types of practices because we're trying to link it back to children having self-efficacy and the confidence around food, being able to self-regulate the foods that they're eating, but also having the emotional intelligence, if you will, around using food as sort of pleasant experience. I'm going to throw it over to Lynda now. Okay.
It's always a challenge when we put together a presentation and we split it halfway through and go back and forth. But I think it's an interesting way to do it. And we both are very familiar with this topic, having worked with it, just maybe in different ways. So what I want to talk to you here about is, with some of my slides, is some of the, I guess we'll call some of the research, some of the examples and background to responsive feeding. So I'm going to start with this little framework here that looks like it's a model initially based on what we called, and I think many of you here, if you've had your training in early childhood education, is parenting styles. And so it's really interesting that it's really just in, I'd say less than the last 10 years, that the whole area of taking parenting styles and applying it to feeding styles has really evolved. And there's also been work that's been taking the parenting styles and applying that in particular to styles promoting physical activity and other health behaviors. So it is a growing area of research, and but that is really where it comes from the parenting styles. So about 2008, two well-known researchers identified really initially 3 parenting patterns related to feeding practices. So they looked at parents as providers, role models, or controllers. And that was associated with the work of modeling behaviors, restricting, pressuring, and monitoring. And then a couple of years later, another very known researchers, they defined these 4 parenting styles, like put together in this framework. And so they did it as authoritative, which I superimposed and called that responsive, because I found when I teach my classes and I'm talking about authoritative and authoritarian, everyone gets them mixed up. So I just removed that issue. I even started to get mixed up myself. So, me first. And that actually means, if you look at some of the comments there, it's related to being democratic, involved, nurturing, structured. I just want to make one quick comment here about responsive feeding, that sometimes there is a slight misunderstanding. I don't know if any of you would have it, but I have heard it from some other people where it's a new topic to them, and they think that it means giving in to the child, and it doesn't at all. It means really having that reciprocal relationship. It means, you know, listening to the cues of the child and providing actually more a supportive and even a structured environment for the mealtime, not giving in to the child. But the child has to learn, you know, that there are practices and there are a way that we are going to engage in our mealtime, but they are able to make decisions about how much they're going to eat and if they're going to eat. Not necessarily the when to eat, because that's going to be the routine meal times. The authoritarian is the controlling, forceful, restrictive, and very, very structured environment. You know, that would be the environment, you know, that I kind of remember my British Air Force father might have been, you know, I remember my poor old brother sitting there in front of a plate of peas, and for days. He never did eat those peas. And, but it was, you know, just almost like a will, force that was being played out. Uninvolved, the neglectful, unengaged, really unstructured. And then indulgent, which is sometimes it's related to that, and it's permissive, uninvolved, nurturing, and unstructured. I think there's actually almost a fifth area that is, you know, if you look at it, it's almost like it's where the it's conflicting. And as we talked about, you may have one parent who may be quite responsive. You may have another parent who's going to be a very authoritarian. You may go to another setting, the grandparent, where it's going to be very permissive. And when we did a little exercise with this one time, and we asked people, we drew the little green tape on the floor, and we asked people to stand where they remembered the parenting styles. And people were trying to stand in all of the different boxes depending on what their memory was bringing them to. So again, it can be conflicting. But now what we tend to sort of focus in is grouping it really as responsive and unresponsive styles. And then the associated positive and negative factors. We've talked a lot about what the responsive style is, and I think it's you know, just going back to our sharing stories video, it's important to respond to children and to be able to acknowledge their views. And I might remember the parent talking about just try to remember that children are experiencing food often for the first time, and to have that respect, you know, that it's all new to them, and let them have the opportunity to explore that. There's evidence that the really restrictive parenting leads to overeating, overindulgence, and often of the high calorie and high fat foods. The other areas, the restrictive and the permissive, what they're actually lacking is it's that reciprocal relationship. And that is the really key part that that leads to, I guess, develop that emotional well-being of children and that healthy relationship with food. So it's, you know, I just want to make that clear. It's yes, those restrictive, the indulgent, but it's the breakdown of that reciprocal relationship between the caregiver and the child. Just before I move on to that, there's just want to bring up a couple. Yeah. So there's just a definition: responsive feeding associated with development of healthy eating behaviors. And I just want to bring out just a little note here. I'm doing another little study with a colleague here on campus, and it kind of stemmed from my work with Nutrition Standards and Childcare Project and some other work. And I asked the question, you know, where do we get we did a study identifying the self-confidence, the self-efficacy for healthy eating, and where does that come from? You know, like it wasn't clear. Does it come from those early experiences? There is some studies that they've done it like with children, like within a narrow time range. But so we actually gathered data from a university student sample, and we looked at, you know, what was their earliest memories around parenting, about healthy eating and physical activity. And surprisingly, we've actually found that the positive memories, those responsive parenting memories during childhood, identify as supportive of healthy eating and also the active lifestyle in young adults. So it's, again, it's a small sample. We can't say that it's definite for everyone, but there certainly is some indication that there is a relationship, which makes perfect sense, of course. It makes me also think about, what is your personal relationship with food and feeding? What are your memories, and how has that impacted your own particular style and approach to feeding children in your care? We all have our memories, we all have our own beliefs, and how are we, even though we go through our learning and our education, how do we adapt and change as we progress in our professional?
I know we have about 5 minutes left.
All right, well, do my best.
As best as you can. Thank you.
I think I can do it. Okay, so this is a quick study about the pressure. Finish your soup, please. And this is explored the effect of pressure by caregivers on the feeding of young children. And I think we talked about, they ultimately found that, the time and exposure to the soup, actually, if there was pressure, like even the mild pressure, it actually led to the children, yes, they may initially try that soup. They looked at, it was squash and corn soup, and it was done in an experimental setting. And, but as time went on, the children, they didn't like that soup going forward. So you may get that initial response and say, hey, this works, but longer term, they're not going to want to eat that soup. So pressure, even mild pressure, can have a negative impact. This is another little study that looked at, are you done versus are you full? And this looked at the types of verbal messages. And very, very quickly, I can give you the link to this, it showed that, and as Misty already talked a little bit about the non-sensory messages and the ones that are more sensory focused. And you look at, they collected by videotape what caregivers, and this was in child care centers in the States, were saying to the children. And you look at the counts there, way more of the non-sensory comments during the meal. Again, kind of coming from like their past knowledge and practice. And then, very few of the ones that are being, looking at the ones that are sensory, focused on hunger, satiety, but also there can be comments related to your, to the aesthetics about the food. So something to think about are the, what are some of those other cues you can come up with? So this is where we're getting into some of the details around that. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to highlight these. This is excerpts from an article about the impact of teachers and families on young children's eating behaviors. And this is a great little article. It summarizes a lot of the points we've already talked about. Positive role modeling correlates with increased interest in food and less food fussiness or pickiness in children. Coercion to eat specific quantities of foods may mean children will eat more at the given meal, but over time, avoid that targeted food. You can have conversations with children about, the qualities of food, the taste, the textures, everything about the food. Make them interested in the food, but you don't want to overdo it. Think about yourself, how annoying it would be to at a meal and everyone's just talking about the taste and texture of the food, and you just want to get out of there, because it starts to feel like pressure after a while. And what we really liked and what we learned from our sharing stories is that children just really wanted to have conversations about food. They wanted to engage and socialize, and perhaps that may be the biggest message of all. And I just want to say, when we did the sharing stories video very quickly, we anticipated it was going to be used as a tool to share stories about caregivers and their experiences and challenges with feeding young children. But the unanticipated finding that we always get with this work is that how important it is for children to share their stories at mealtime. So sharing stories has a whole other meaning. It's about children wanting to share stories about their lives. but thinking about your own experiences of conversation with children. I won't go through all of these 10 steps. We can share this information with you, but it summarizes these key points from the Eliason article. And just to end off, my final comments brings us to you as a early childhood educator. How can you create that responsive feeding environment? Everyone brings their own background, their own ways to support different child temperaments, how to help children grow and develop, and but you also bring your own beliefs and values and background to that. And the more that we can all do is have that self-reflection. Think about it, and that's a way to sort of expand and grow and understand and have that confidence around responsive feeding. So it's more than just like doing this and this, but to really believe in it and to understand it. And I think that's the, we can all do this, in groups, we can all do it in sharing, actually have that reflection about responsive feeding and what it really means to us and what it means to the children.
Thank you. That was perfect. So we are going to, as I said, have a facilitated discussion period in small groups. But before we break into that, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions for presenters. Yeah.
If you take out the factor of food, and when you're in the position of not being the one who's providing the food, can you still be responsive to when children are bringing their own lunches to school, and you're role modeling eating this delicious salad or what you have access to, and you have a different socioeconomic group, how can you be responsive?
So just for those on the line, the microphone's right there. Just to reiterate, I think the essence of the question, correct me if I'm wrong, is if there's different types of food maybe around the table and you're consuming different because of the setting, how do you still exude that environment?
Right, how do you be responsive?
How do you
can't control the food?
Sure, great. Misty, Lynda?
I would say that's a really great question, and kind of goes back to, it doesn't have to be always about the food. The food, it does come first in responsive feeding, is important, but it's also about the conversations you can have, and just learning that there is a positive socialization experience while people sit and eat food. And so, I mean, you could talk about what you're having. You don't need to do any shaming or anything with other children do, but just to have a conversation and let them share their stories about their dreams and imagination.
Steve?
Yeah, I would echo that almost exactly. And I think also it's about those sort of cues for self-regulation, or when they're done, whether they're eating the delicious salad or whatever is brought from home. And again, not making a big deal about it either way, right? It is what it is, and everybody's eating, and everyone's sort of respecting their own bellies and checking in, and when they're done. Good question.
Really good question, though. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience here? From not so far from Mark. Okay. Yes.
I have a couple of educators that work with me who have been in the field a long, long time. And there's one woman in particular who doesn't think that children should be allowed to talk while they're eating because of the possibility of choking.
Okay.
And so there's days I agree with her because kids will be shoving food in and then they choke because they're trying to talk and they're spitting food or whatever because the voice and the, it's counterintuitive to be breathing out, talking, and trying to ingest your food at the same time. So, so we always get wrapped up in this, and like I say, some days I'm totally with her, and other days I'm thinking, leave them alone. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because, and that goes back to, she's of the same age as I am, and so it goes back to when we were growing up that you were told to sit down, eat your supper, don't talk while you're eating, because you could choke. And so, and nowadays we're totally on the other side of that, we're encouraging conversation.
Yeah.
So I understand where she's coming from.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of on the fence on it because, I kind of agree, but I kind of think it should be the other way. So don't really know what to
Any
recommend.
comments? Yeah, Lynda?
Yeah, it's also learning, you know, I guess the socialization way to behave during meal times. And well, we all know you don't talk with your mouth full. Okay, so it's learning if you have something to say, you wait until you swallow and then you can talk. You know, so it's done in a decorous manner. You know?
Right.
So I mean, that's how I would.
That's kind of what I've been encouraging. Because I'll say, don't talk while there's food in there.
Yeah, just, you know, so it's part of, it's the same thing the families tell you, learn how to pass the dishes.
Exactly.
You learn to maybe wait until everyone is ready to eat. You know, it's learning some of that routine around the meal time. Right? You know? And again, but you don't have to eat if you don't want to.
Right.
I just want to reflect to something you said, is just being aware of our own sort of biases, I think, too, and where I love that you you're reflecting the fact that when I grew up, this is how it was. Yeah, so it's being really reflective.
And it's not easy to make those changes.
For sure.
They're
Yeah.
lifelong, you know, practices that are
For sure.
inbred into you.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. Misty?
Yeah, I would agree, and I think it would be great to sort of get away from the blanket statement of no eating, you know, because I think the reality is true, and it's certainly well intended, but we don't want children choking, and we want to sort of develop that socially appropriate behavior. But to have the children sort of think that no eating or no talking during mealtime is the best way, but it also could be ill-intended as well.
Right.
But I can appreciate it is challenging. And back to mealtime service, when you think about, you know, it's great to talk about, oh, mealtime service is so good, social behaviors are being learned, but meanwhile, someone's looking at like a budget, right, a food budget, and how much waste is happening, and just the logistics of getting kids, you know, as they're learning to sort of self-regulate, they're like, you know, they could be taking way too much of something, and so I can completely appreciate the challenges that go along with these sort of lovely best practices.
I think we'll do one more question from one of the other sites, and then we'll start actually the group discussion. So it sounds like someone, I think maybe an educator in one of the rooms, has a parent at the center that insists his children. So it's a dad that insists his children is on a certain diet, so a keto diet is the example. How might you sort of manage that or approach that in perhaps a care environment?
I think if there's actually a guideline or it's in the standards for regulated child care centers, food and nutrition, and it says that you know, they can try to sort of accommodate children, but my understanding from teaching my courses that a lot of times the parents are, you know, bring in the food for the child, and you know, whether it's an allergy or some special diet. So yeah, and that's the same thing I teach my course, and I often have students who are on all kinds of diets, and I just tell them I'm not here to judge about a diet. I'm here to talk about feeding young children, and yeah, it's not my role.
Anything else? Or?
Yeah, no, I might just add that that I think I would totally agree. I think parents have autonomy around what they decide that they feed their children, but I also think that we do have a subtle role, and not necessarily to change one parent from not being on the keto diet. If that's what they choose, that's certainly that's appropriate for them. But early childhood educators and the early years environment, you guys are experts in what you do, right? So I think it's such a great opportunity to work with centers and educators who have this expertise in healthy child development, and using centers as a way to provide some of these sort of great messages. You know, the way that we feed our children is just another aspect of you know, growing healthy, happy young children. So I think there are subtle ways that we can work at more general messaging.
Yeah. There's one other question from another site, and I think it's something that might come up, so I might throw it to you, Misty, first. Just concerns about overeating. So some of the participants talked about under-eating and not whether or not they had enough food, with concerns of childhood obesity, childhood overweight. How do you manage that in a responsive feeding environment?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it does come up. And when I've got a room of educators, or when I'm working with parents especially, it can be a problem. And I think we are used to sort of saying, oh, you know, that's enough. And in some of our work that we've done, we actually heard from some educators who were like, little Johnny's a little bigger, so you shouldn't have as much maybe, and this, so we're really relating it back to body size, which I would suggest, I would certainly discourage. So responsive feeding practices really respect the autonomy of that particular child to work, either self-regulate or work on their own self-regulation, and that may not mean getting it right every time. So there could be some overeating, there could be some undereating. But I think if we look to sort of change and shift the culture of the center, that you don't necessarily worry about that. They are going to, they will eventually sort of learn to self-regulate themselves over time. Yeah, Lynda, do you have anything to add on that?
Anything to add on that?
Oh, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
yeah,
very good.
Yeah, so there's no restrictions. And then I think on the other side of that, the reality is children are growing. So it's not appropriate to provide restrictions for children at this age. We talk about, offering lots of healthy foods and encouraging, activity and being active. And we don't talk about body size. We talk about, being healthy and healthy bodies.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we're going to split into discussion. Brenda's going to give an overview of our little group templates that we have to facilitate some discussion for the last little bit of our time together.
Yeah, so we do have some templates. We'll encourage you to get in groups of no more than 5. And so the template will basically have this different set of questions. It'll just get you to think about the different things that we learned, not just from the videos, but also from the presentation. But we highly encourage you, so in those groups of 5s, try to mix it up a little bit. So rather than sticking with the people you know from your center, just to build some more of those new connections with others, try to find some people you don't know already.
And just to highlight, we're going to give you markers. Please use the templates to write things. So not only will the presentations be shared, I think, to participants, we'll also collate all of your ideas. So there's so much knowledge in the room. Please document, record your observations, experiences, so that we can share that with the group as well. And I think the sessions, the satellite sessions are okay. We'll mute them.
And we do also have sticky notes. So if you find you somehow run out of space, they're pretty large, but we do have sticky notes as well. So you can use whatever you can.
So for the last 15 minutes or so, we'll do that, and then we'll wrap up. 20 minutes. Yeah. That might be a little. Yeah, I really got that last one came up. Yeah. How are you? How are you? See, I didn't say when you said your name. I'm like, she's speaking. I didn't even see you come in. I know you were. Oh, no. Good, really good. I'm so glad. Here. No. We're still just like, can we start on something? We actually had to wait. So are they
yes, so I would say no. So centers that are doing well with sort of it's a little bit different. Yeah, I know. They have to, or they have to. There's a poster. So they would say that they are now what we've learned is that they may have to say it's different, but in exactly in standards that they're line that we need say responsibility or that they together or things like that. And so they might think that they're doing it, but then and use they don't quite get it.
All right, so it is 7:29. I want to be really respectful of all of your time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's seminar. Thank you to the satellite sessions as well for being able to do this by distance. There were only a few hiccups along the way with technology, so not too bad if you ask me. We're going to, as I mentioned, collate those, the flip charts, the templates that you have there, and we'll put that together into a summary document to share back with participants, as well as I said, the presentation from Misty and Lynda. Just a couple of things. If you would like a certificate for attendance, make sure that we have your email address. The attendance sheet is just down here. Make sure it's signed, and we'll get that to you. A survey is going to be also sent to those that registered to the event. Please give us feedback. As I said, this is the first of a series of seminars that we're planning through the Research Center. So please give us feedback. What topics would you like? Did this work? Did the format work? All of those things. And then finally, stay tuned for more information from us. And as always, reach out to us by email or social media and connect that way. Thanks for coming tonight. And thanks to our presenters very much for your time and knowledge. Great.